Okay, thank you, Pastor York. Welcome. Uh-oh. Hold on as we're trying to figure out all the equipment. It's getting old, so we are sometimes struggling trying to be able to make things work the way that it's supposed to work. But thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate you for being here and being part of the GCCI family, and we hope that these messages and that the various services that we provide for you are a blessing to you, for you throughout the week as well as to you on Sunday. We do want to remember those that have fallen in order to give us freedom and life. And so thank you, Pastor York, for that moment of silence that we can be able to remember the soldiers who gave their lives so that we might be free. And that's what this Memorial Day weekend is all about. I know it marks the beginning of summer, but if you really feel like this is a time, and we do at this church, a time of prayer and a time of seeking the Lord for what's happening in our nation, then do so. Mark it by maybe picking a meal that you can fast from, or something that you can do in order to dedicate more of your time to praying to God so that you can be ready for His movement and whatever happens in this land. I do believe we are on the cusp of immense change, and we need to be seeking the Lord continually in order to be able to know where He's going to go and how we can join Him in that. How many of you are ever familiar with something called the mother's curse? You know anything about that? I don't know if it's a Chinese tradition or not. I know it's American tradition. It's called the mother's curse, and here is the curse. Maybe some of your parents have cursed you this way. I know my mother never did curse me this way, but I got cursed by it anyway, and this is the mother's curse. May you have a child that is exactly like you. That's the mother's curse. Often children give our parents a hard time, and the result is they turn around and wish that our children will do the exact same thing to us. Well, I have to tell you, I have a son who is exactly like me. He is so much like me. Sometimes I joke and call him mini-me because he just does everything that I do. I remember, in order to give you a case in point, a story about my son Josiah. Josiah one time was at my wife's tutoring center, and I had gone there in order to try to probably pick him or Samantha up and take him somewhere. And as I went in, I heard something that I'll never forget. See, often when my children come to me and try to complain, I will do things that will sort of teach them not to complain. And one of the things that I did is whenever they would say, Daddy, I want, Daddy, I need, Daddy, I have to have, I would say, you have to have. What about my wants? What about what I need? So lo and behold, I walk into the tutoring center, and as I'm there, I hear this little voice, my son's voice, saying, what you want, what about my wants, what about my needs? Exactly the same way that I would have said it to somebody else. In fact, sometimes, even to this day, I want to be so angry with my son because he's getting to be a little debater. He loves to argue, and he wants to know why. And I want to be, Josiah, what's wrong with you? But I can't, because I know that's me. Every time he does something that sort of frustrates his mother, and I want to be really upset with that, I know I probably would have done the exact same thing if I was in his situation. He's just like me. Why would God do that? Why would God make a family member be just like me? Well, I think there's an answer, and it's in the book of Ephesians. Now, we're not going to study the book of Ephesians. We're going to continue to study the book of Genesis. But I want to share something with you about this, and that is often the New Testament will say something didactically. They'll say it through a teaching or an instruction, a quick paragraph that the Old Testament will have an entire illustration about. And here's what Ephesians says. This is, not Ephesians, this is Galatians. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7 says this, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Do not be deceived, Paul says to the church at Galatia. God cannot be mocked. He will not be mocked. The things that we do, that means what we sow, will indeed come back to us. We will reap what we sow. Okay? Whatever you sow. Now, I reaped as a child, or I reap as an adult, rather. I sowed as a child. Sometimes I loved to debate. Sometimes I loved to argue, even with my parents. I got a child that loved to argue, even with his parents. Right? But when we sow kindness, love, goodness, that we will also reap. Let me give you another illustration of that. When I was older, in just out of college, a very dear friend of mine had something happen to him. His name is Garcia, and Eric and I have been friends for, probably a good 20 to 30 years. We met when we were in college, and we both competed on speech and debate teams. He competed for Cal State Fullerton. I competed for Biola University. But the two schools were really closely related because my coach was actually in grad school at Cal State Fullerton while he was coaching us. And so we had this great relationship with the Cal State Fullerton team, and he and I became really, really good friends. We even sometimes at tournaments would share rooms with Cal State Fullerton. And so I was sharing a room with him, and we had great and long conversations. When we both graduated, we both started to teach for Biola University. He taught debate, I taught speech. And then as we grew older, we continued to be in that speech and debate world, both helping each other out and trying to make Biola's program the best it could be. Well, in that process, while we were teaching at Biola, his father happened to pass away. And when Eric's father passed away, it was pretty devastating to him and to his family. Now, he had been sick for quite a long time. But still, when you lose a loved one like that, it is an amazing loss. And my friends and I decided that while we were there, and this was one of the things that we did for each other, is that whenever anybody lost something, we planned on just sitting with them. We would stay behind. We would make sure that everything was taken care of. We would share in their stories, and we would contribute stories of our own. We did that in order to try to say to those that were in need, we're here for you. Whatever you need, we're here for you. Little did I know the type of impact that us and my group of friends did by staying behind and just sharing with the family and making sure that they were taken care of and encouraging them and strengthening them, what kind of impact that would make. Because years later, my mother and father moved to Missouri and stayed there while my father was working at American Airlines back in Kansas City, Missouri. And then when he retired, they were planning on moving back. And they needed help transporting a lot of their luggage in a U-Haul and one of the cars that they owned. And so I decided to fly back and help them move that U-Haul back. But I knew I couldn't do this on my own. I was going to need help. And so I decided to talk to some of my friends. And one of the friends I talked to was Eric. And Eric said, sure, I'd love to help you. I'd love to help your family move. And so he and I made plans. We were going to fly out to Kansas City and then drive back with that U-Haul and try to get here as quickly as possible. Well, while he was making his arrangements on his end, he was telling his family what was going on. He said, yeah, I'm going to fly back to Kansas City, Missouri, and then I'm going to drive a U-Haul towing a car all the way back to California. They said, what? Why are you doing that? No, you shouldn't. That's dangerous. You don't want to do that. You need to stay here. And he said, no, it's going to be fine. I mean, I love to drive. I'm going to go back with a friend, and we're going to drive back together. And they said, who? Who are you going back with? And he said, oh, well, it's Dan Elliott. And his whole family said, oh, well, that's okay. Because of what I invested into the life of his family, unbeknownst to me, that little seed that I sowed blossomed into some amazing kindness to help me and my family. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will reap. And as we look at the life of Jacob, we're going to see in this lesson, and I have to say, honestly, I'm kind of excited to share this with you. What exactly God allowed to happen to Jacob in order to help him with transformation. I think it's no mistake that God spoke to Pastor York today to speak about the process, because the process of transformation is essential for us to understand so that we can welcome what God is doing in our life and take part in his reformation of our souls. You see, part of what Galatians is saying is part of God's process. We are going to reap what we sow so that we might be transformed by it. How does that work? Well, let's take a look at Genesis chapter 29, verses 1 through 30. Now, this is going to be a rare time in which I'm not going to read the entire chapter of Genesis chapter 29, because I actually think what happens in verse 31 is better applied to the full arc of the story in chapter 30. So we're going to stop in the middle of the chapter at verse 30. So let's read together what the word of the Lord says regarding Jacob and how he is going to get what he has sown. As the title of the sermon says, what goes around comes around. It says this, Genesis chapter 29, verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey, and he came to the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered, and the stone of the well's mouth was large. And when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll away from the stone of the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, my brothers, where do you come from? They said, we are from Haran. He said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? They said, we know him. He said to them, is it well with him? They said, it is well. See, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. He said, but behold, it's still high day. Is it not time for the livestock to be gathered together? Water the sheep, go to pasture them. But they said, we cannot, until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. While he was still speaking to them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel and the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near, rolled the stone from the well's mouth, watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother, and then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. Now, Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. And as soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him, embraced him, kissed him, and brought him to his house. And Jacob told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are bone of my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him a month. Now, then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you not therefore serve me for nothing? So tell me, what shall be your wages? Now, Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you for 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. And Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than she should be... hold on, I've lost my place for a second. It is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man, so stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go in to her, for my time has been completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the places and made a feast. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went in to her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. In the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? Laban said, it's not done so in our country to give the youngest before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him her daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went in to Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. That's a lot that has taken place. Let me briefly break it down, what this means and why it matters so much to us. What is God trying to do in exposing an event like this in the life of Jacob? Now, remember, we have to go back a little bit and understand verse 1. Jacob has left alone from Beersheba. He met with God at Bethel, and then he tries to travel again on his own all the way to Haran. And this is not an easy trip. In fact, if he were to go straight from Beersheba to Haran, it would be 460 miles, but it would take him through deserts, which he was probably not able to cross alone, especially if it's, as I think, he's on foot. That means he's going to have to travel north along the coast in order to be able to be near places where he could be able to drink, and then try to travel east all the way to Haran. Now, I know as you're looking at the map, you're saying, well, isn't Haran a lot more north than it is east? And the answer is correct, but it's still considered to be a country of the east because it's further east than Beersheba. So, Jacob is leaving on his own without any guide, without any help in order to try to make it to Haran. He has to do so alone. And so he does. He walks all the way on his own to the east. And he arrives at this one well. He doesn't know the name of the city. There's no markers or street lights or signs to be able to tell him where he's at. All he does is run across a well in this eastern area. As he sees this well, there are these 3 flocks that are around the well waiting for the other flocks to gather in order for them to be able to drink from the well. But they have this great stone that's in front of it. What they did is they waited for all the sheep to be able to gather, and then they would work together, because you're usually talking about really young men, even kids, moving the well or moving this stone from off the well. They would work together in order to move the stone, and then they would water all the flocks. Well, when Jacob gets there, he's going to move the stone by himself. And the question, of course, we have to ask ourselves is, why would he do something like that? What in the world is going through his mind that's going to cause him to be like, I'm going to do it, and he just does it by himself? Well, let's put together what happens in the story. He shows up and he sees these shepherds kind of sitting around. They're probably not old like the pictures are indicating. They're probably quite young men. And he goes to them and he says, hey, guys, where are you from? Right? What is this place? And they respond to him with great news. In the end of verse 4, they say, we're from Haran. Yes, he has made it. God has indeed kept his promise. He has gotten to this area quite well. Now he needs to know, hey, do you guys know Laban? And they say, yeah, we do. We know him. Yes, okay. Now we're cooking with gas here. He's in the right place. He's amongst people who know who his uncle is. Now maybe he can be able to get some help finding him. And so he asks another key question. Is it well with him? Or is peace to him? Now, remember what God said just in the last verse. As God meets Jacob in this ladder, he speaks to him and says specifically to him 3 promises directed to Jacob. He says, behold, I am with you. Promise number 2, I have already kept you in all which you walk. And promise 3, I will proceed to bring you back to the land of your fathers. 3 important promises. The 2 of them matter the most to us, the first 2. But behold, I am with you. And the second, I have kept you in all the way which you will walk. See, this meeting with these shepherds at Haran is proof that God indeed is keeping his promises. That God has been with him on the journey, that he has led him to the right space. And lo and behold, all of these people know Laban, who he wants to try to meet. And so he asks that 3rd question, is the peace to him? And the word for peace here is shalom. It means not just peace, but wholeness, wellness, fullness, completeness. He's asking him, is everything all right with Laban? And their answer is, Yes, it most certainly is. In fact, as they look out into the distance, here comes Rachel, his daughter. She's come to water the flocks. Now, there's got to be something to this. See, what Jacob does next only makes sense if he took one look at Rachel and goes, wow. Because if he just does this out of the blue, since he's related to her, it's kind of odd or awkward. It just makes the scene really even kind of creepy. But if she is so attractive, as the Bible says later, then he takes one look at her and he tries to kind of be alone with him. This is kind of a move that I might have done if I was Jacob back in the day. And he goes, hey, guys, isn't the date getting kind of high? I mean, is it kind of late? So he literally is trying to tell them, because he probably has some experience with being a shepherd. Since he wasn't a hunter like Esau, he probably was close to the tents and taking care of a lot of the sheep. He said, well, isn't it time that you go water your flocks, and you got to walk and proceed to take them out to pasture? Do you see what he's doing? Why don't you move the stone now? You can water your flocks, and then you can leave. And then he will be able to be alone with Rachel. But they say, nah, we can't do that. No, we're not going to do that, because we wait for all the shepherds to gather. See, they were pretty smart, and they had a really good routine going there. They wait for all the flocks of all the shepherds together, because they all kind of knew each other. They worked together in making sure all their flocks were safe. And in order to make sure that the well had nice, clean water, they only wanted to move that stone once. Once to remove it so that all the flocks could get their water. And then one more time when everyone was finished to put it back in order to protect the water supply. So they were planning on moving it one time and one time only. So they told him, we're going to wait until all the flocks have gathered, and then we're going to move the stone, and then we're going to water the flock. And Jacob does again something, thinking, oh, drat, he couldn't be alone with Rachel. Maybe if he tries to serve Rachel, he'll make a good impression. So he, by himself, oh, wait a minute, just a second, in verse 9, while he's still talking to them, Rachel does show up. So now he makes his decision. I'm going to try to serve her. And so he himself goes to the well, grabs the stone, moves this stone, which had to have been rather heavy, in order to be able to cover a well that contained enough water to water flocks and give drink to men and women of the city. He moves the stone by himself and then proceeds to water the flocks. Now, this sets up this really unique scene, which, if you understand this, is kind of funny, because it just, especially if you understand the people here and how there's no letters, there's no telephones, these events are just happening and unfolding right in front of them with no background information to let them know what's going on. This is hilarious. So imagine Rachel, women, if you will, imagine this happening to you. Okay, you're coming just to be a shepherdess. It's a normal day, and all of a sudden this stranger comes running over to the well just as you arrive and goes, "Hurrah!" Moves the stone, grabs some pottery or something in order to draw water from the well, and begins to water your flock for you. Then he stands up, grabs you, kisses you, cries out, ah, and then weeps on your shoulder. Does that sound like a normal day to you? Now, it gets even better, because after he stops crying, he then dries his tears and proceeds to tell her the story that he is from the land of Canaan and has traveled this far. He is her cousin, and now he's looking for Laban's house in order to try to find a wife. And she, upon hearing this, runs. What'd I say? Right? She runs home in order to tell Laban of what she had just experienced, leaving her whole flock. Now, Laban realizes what's going on because he's already been in a situation like this before. Remember, when Rebekah, his sister, was selected by that servant, he got a bunch of money. So he runs out in order to try to see who this person is and just perhaps how much he's going to be able to get. When he runs and finds Jacob, he grabs him, he hugs him, he kisses him, and he takes him home with him and proceeds to say to everyone there, "Surely this is my bone and my flesh. You are my family." And he is going to try to treat him well. Of course, if you already understand Laban, you kind of know Laban's looking out for Laban. And so him treating Jacob well, not going to be the best thing that's ever happened in Jacob's life. What does Laban do? After about a month, Laban's kind of realizing, you know what? This is getting into a little bit of an awkward situation because Jacob has now been living with him, and probably if it's been an entire month, Jacob has worked with him and helped him out and done a lot of stuff for him, but he's not getting anything for it. Laban's just kind of abusing him. And he doesn't want it to kind of get back, but knowing Laban, he probably is taking as much advantage of Jacob as he possibly can in getting this free labor. And after about a month, probably his daughters are saying, you just want him to leave. Come on, Dad, you got to do something. And so he says, all right. After 1 month, Laban turns to Jacob and says, hey, you're my family, you're serving me, you're helping me. I can't just treat you like a slave. Behold, you must declare to me what wages you're going to have. Boy, isn't that a great job? I'd love to be able to say, hey, Pastor Brian, here's my wages, right? That's not going to happen, okay? Jacob got to pick whatever he wanted. Whatever income he wanted to be able to continue to stay and help Laban, that was going to be his pay. And what does he decide to do? The Bible explains Jacob's reasoning, and this is what he experienced. See, Laban had 2 daughters, okay? We already know about one of them. We know Rachel. Rachel, the younger daughter, who was a shepherdess, came out to meet Jacob. But this is the first time that we've really gotten to see his older daughter, Leah. Now, what is the difference between Leah? Leah is the older, Rachel is the younger. Rachel is beautiful. What about Leah? The description that we have for Leah is really, really interesting at best. And here's why. See, in everything that we have listened to in Genesis, we know nearly nothing about what the people of the Bible look like. We don't know a lot about what Abraham looked like. We don't know a lot about Sarah, other than that she was beautiful and even a bit of a hottie when she was old. We know that Rebecca was beautiful. We don't know a lot about Isaac. We don't know what he looked like. We know that Esau was red, that he had red hair. But that's really it. So whenever the Bible does mention a description of someone, that's kind of their defining characteristic. That is the thing that everybody sort of knows them by. Now, what do they know Leah by? It's this, but her eyes, or the eyes of Leah, were delicate. What does that mean? Now, some people have interpreted that to mean that she wasn't that good looking, that she was kind of, the girl that fell off the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. This poor girl probably wasn't that attractive, but that's not what the scripture is saying. If it was that she was not very attractive, they probably would say that Leah was delicate to the eyes. Does that make sense? Not the eyes of Leah were delicate. Okay, so what does that mean to have these delicate eyes? We don't know. The best guess that we can really come up with is that maybe she didn't see really well. She was kind of blind. And especially if you think like now we can have glasses, maybe she was extremely nearsighted. Maybe that wouldn't allow her to go into the field. Maybe that didn't really allow her to be helpful around the house because she constantly had trouble seeing. If you were really close, she could see you fine, but maybe if you were far away, she had no idea what you were like, and there was no such thing as glasses to be able to help her. My dad had that kind of vision. He was extremely nearsighted. In fact, he tells a story when he went to war in Vietnam, he was being tested in order to see what his physical abilities were like in order to decide where he could serve. And so one of the tests that he had to take was a vision test. And when he took his vision test, the man that was conducting the test said, okay, I want you to take off your glasses, I want you to close one eye, and I want you to read what you see on the chart on the wall. And my dad said, I'm sorry, sir, if I take off my glasses, I'm not going to be able to see anything. And the guy said, nonsense, just do what you're told, soldier. And so my dad said, okay, fine. And so he pulled off his glasses, and he honestly said, what do you want me to do? And he said, I told you, put your hand over your eye and go read the chart on the wall. And my dad put his hand over his eye, and he said, okay, where's the chart? And he said, it's over there on the wall. And my dad said, where's the wall? He had that kind of weak vision, okay? Maybe his eyes in the Old Testament wording would have been considered delicate, okay? Or maybe she just couldn't see well in the sun. Like me, if I'm out in a nice, bright day, I tend to get headaches because the glare of the sun is so intense for my blue eyes. Who knows exactly what it is, but something about Leah's eyes is actually contrasted with Rachel because it says about her that she had become beautiful and her vision was beautiful. So something with the eyes is what is making Jacob say, not the appearance, but the eyes, I prefer Rachel. And he began to love Rachel. So he turns to Laban and he says, all right, Laban, I want to marry your younger daughter. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work for you for 7 years. Now, over 7 years, he should have accumulated quite a bit of money. I'm going to take every bit of money that you normally would give to me for working those 7 long years, and I'm going to give it back to you in order to marry your daughter. Wow, slave labor for 7 years? Hot dog. That sounds like a great idea. And Laban said, well, you know, it's better to give her to you than to someone else. So you stay with me, you work for me, and we will do this. And Jacob was so excited. He was just loved Rachel that much, even after just spending a month with Laban's family, that the Bible says as he worked for Laban for 7 years, it just felt like days. Oh, it just flew by. And when the 7 years was finally up, now he was ready to claim his victory, his prize, the woman that he loved. He was going to marry Rachel. And so he went to Laban and he said to Laban, Laban, the time is up. Give me Rachel to be my wife. And the Bible says this in 29 verse 22. And this is very important so that we can be able to understand what then happens next and why he could get away with this. Laban proceeded to gather all the men to his place. Then he proceeded to make a feast. Question: what happens at a nice big wedding feast? Well, if you've ever been to a wedding feast in the Korean tradition, and this is what happened when my wife and I got married, because both of us have been married or had been in ministry for a long time, that we had to plan for about 400 people to come to our wedding. And so we had to spend a lot of money. And what we spent the most amount of money was on the food. We had to feed everybody. They had this nice big buffet. I bet you that's probably true in the Chinese tradition. Am I right? You have this nice big buffet so that everybody can be able to eat and feel happy and celebrate the beloved couple. That's what Laban did. But not only do you have food, but back then you would also have wine. And so everybody can eat and everybody can drink. especially the groom, who is probably so drunk by the time the actual wedding ceremony gets up, he has no idea what he's doing. And Laban can make the switch. See, it proceeded to happen in the evening then that he proceeded to take Leah, his daughter, and then Jacob proceeded to come into her. Now, what does that mean? And I know that this is kind of awkward because nobody does it this way in a wedding ceremony anymore. But this was the standard practice of a wedding ceremony in the ancient times of Israel. When a husband and a wife got married, you not only got married that day and you got to say, hello, hooray, great, thank you for coming, and then you left, right? That didn't happen. The wedding night consisted of everybody eating, everybody drinking, and then as the rest of the guests were still having their party, the husband and the bride would go into another part of the tent or the house and they would consummate the marriage. So that is what made the marriage official and legal. So Jacob took Leah back in order to consummate the marriage, while everybody else was having a party. But he is hungover. He doesn't recognize who he's taking back. Until the next day. He wakes up probably a little hungover, probably a little groggy, and goes, oh, wow, what a night. Oh, I'm married. I'm married to Leia. Oh, he's furious. He got duped. What is this? He worked 7 years, and now it's the wrong woman? Oh, no, he is going to straighten this out right now. And so he immediately goes to Laban, and he says, hey, what is this that you made to me? If not in Rachel, I worked with you, and to what? You beguiled me. Here's what this means. I worked for Rachel. You gave me Leah. You tricked me. What in the world did you do that for? And Laban doesn't even miss a beat. This is why we know this was planned. He says this in response to Jacob's anger. In my place, to give the younger before the face of the firstborn? He's saying, you don't do that. Here in this country, in this land, the firstborn has to marry first. Which is why some people think that Leah might have been not that good looking, which is why he just sort of planned to or hoped that he could marry her off in those 7 years. That never happened, so he just gives her to Jacob. No. I think Laban knew exactly what he was doing. He got free labor out of the deal. He never intended to give Leah to anyone. He always intended to make her Jacob's wife. And hey, even better, you worked 7 years for Leah. Why not? You worked just 7 more for Rachel. 14 years of slave labor in order to be able to satisfy his lust for money. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. That dirty rat. My gosh, how in the world is God just letting this stuff happen? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the question. It's the most important question to ask, because we just finished in the story before God promising that he was going to be with Jacob. God promising, I'm going to keep you in the way that you can walk. How is this God fulfilling his promises? Because when we think that God is going to be with me, we think there's nothing for me to be afraid of. But certainly someone tricking me this way would cause you to pause and should cause you to be a little concerned, if not afraid. What is God doing? And this is the question that matters the most to us. This indeed is part of God's process. And here's what we have to recognize. 3 important things about that promise that you and I need to know. When God says, like in Hebrews 13:5, behold, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. This is a similar promise to what God is making to Jacob. We've got to understand what God means in order to be able to have full faith in it. And this is what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that keeping us in the way that we shall go will make us never have any difficulty in our life. Often Christians think this and they make this mistake. And it honestly is made in a good place, but it gets twisted to mean something it's not supposed to mean. God is just, which means he punishes the wicked and he rewards the righteous. If I am righteous and I try to live by God's standards, surely he's going to reward me, not punish me. But we see all of the bad events in our lives as punishments from God. That's not true. The difficulties that you and I face is just a normal part of a life that has been twisted and perverted by sin. God keeping us does not mean he shields us from the pain. It means he walks through us or walks with us through the pain. Do you understand? Church, we cannot fall into this trap. So the first thing we have to realize is that God is not shielding Jacob from what is happening to him. Second is this: pain is a useful tool in transformation. The easiest, most cliche way of saying this is you can't make omelets without breaking eggs. But here's the better way to understand it. When God allows pain to occur in our life, it is a clear sign that we can't do it on our own. We need him. And it is in those times of pain where we, like the song that Connie said, can fall on our knees and cry out to God and say, I need you. Lord, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness is that God, I need you. That was a perfect song for this. Connie, you were blessed by God in making that decision. Pain is that tool that lets us do that. It helps us do that so we can have our proper place of humility before a great and powerful God. But here's the third, and this is the most important for Jacob's purposes and for ours. The third reason why God allows something like this to happen to him is sinful habits must be felt to be removed. Sinful habits must be felt personally in order for them to be removed. How does that work? Let me give you some ways in which God does this. Think of it a little bit like a bad taste in your mouth, right? Have you ever had something that tastes so gross you don't want to have it again? That taste in my mouth is cucumbers. I hate cucumbers. I have always detested cucumbers. From the very beginning of my childhood, as far back as I can remember, I despised cucumbers. They leave this nasty taste in my mouth. And the worst part about a cucumber is this: you eat it, it tastes like nothing. But then after you swallow it, that nothing taste morphs and becomes something disgusting to me. I cannot stand it. I detest it. I hate cucumbers. So you can give me anything. Like, I really like sushi. I really like sashimi. You stick a cucumber in it like a California roll, be gone from me, you sinful creature. That I will never, ever, ever want to touch it. Because I believe that when man sinned, God said, let there be cucumbers. Do you understand how much I detest these things? That's how much we should detest sin. It should leave this nasty taste in our mouth. Now, we want to say, be gone from me. Even including letting sin be gone from our own lives because we know the bad taste that it leaves. So what does God do? God allows you to see that bad habit. sometimes in yourself, by a consequence that happens to you because of your bad habit, but many times you see your bad habit in someone else. And you begin to detest it and despise it. And the whole time, God is using that person to be a mirror to say, do you see what's happening in your own soul? It doesn't always mean that, but it often means that. You see that bad habit, and sometimes even you see that potential bad habit. And you say to yourself, never, I never want to endure that or cause anyone else to endure that. Let me give you an example of that in my own life. When I was a student at Biola University, one of the classes I had to take was the book of Acts. Now, I was kind of excited to take the book of Acts because it was a Bible class, and I loved studying the Bible, and so this was a good journey to me. But it was a required class, and there was only one guy that semester who taught it. And his name I don't want to mention, so I'm not going to call him by his name. I won't refer to Dr. Dollar at all. So this professor that taught this class stood up the very first day of class, and he said, most of you are taking this class as a general education. You have to be in this class. And many of you think that in GEs you can sort of sit back, relax, and cruise yourself to an easy A. But I'm here to tell you, for my class, you are going to have to work as hard, if not harder, than any class that you are going to work in your major. In order to pass this class, you will have to put forth maximum effort. And when I was sitting back in my seat, I thought in my own head, I hate you. I can't stand you. Well, you're telling me that I don't necessarily want to be in this class. I'm forced to be in this class, and you are going to torture me for the next 16 weeks. Thank you, no. But because I had that experience, I swore to myself, God, I never want to do that with my class. If I ever teach a general education class, I am never going to make them suffer that way. I grew a distaste for that type of teaching. Years later, I became a professor of a general education class, and I often started my class by first telling them that story and then saying these words. So today, you're taking a general education class. You don't want to be here, you have to be here. I am not going to torture you for the next 16 weeks. I am not going to make this a difficult class that you are going to suffer through. I am going to try to do everything in my power to make sure that you get the grade you want to get. All it takes is a little bit of effort, staying on top of things, and you're going to do great. And I've literally had students in my class break out in standing ovations because of what I said. See, I had to see a bad habit to create a distaste for it in my own life so that I would never want to do that again. The second thing that God does is he helps you feel the pain that it causes in you so that you don't want to produce the pain in someone else. The problem is that in our twisted minds and perversions, we feel somehow like that pain produced in us character, so then we turn around and inflict it on other people. That's the wrong way to look at it. God is exposing you to something so that you go, what? No, if that hurt me so much, I never want somebody else to face that, so I will never, ever do that. And finally, you begin to promise to yourself, I'm going to be different. I'm going to change. My daughter is thinking through that promise because, as many of you know, she has had a very, very difficult 8th grade year. Her math teacher has been so brutal to her, it's caused her to kind of be afraid of math. And she actually turned to me and said this year, now, well, who knows if God is actually going to do that? But she said to me, Dad, maybe I should become a teacher so that nobody else has to endure that. Bingo. That's what God does. We feel the pain. We detest it. So we swear, I'm never going to let that happen again. not in my life. Jacob had used treachery to steal not only his brother's birthright, but his brother's blessing. He used deception. It was premeditated, planned out and executed, so that he could become what Isaac would prophesy over and get the best of that blessing. God had to let him feel it. Do you see what deception does? God had to let him emotionally endure it so that he could swear, that's not what I want to do with my life. Now, does that mean he's instantly transformed? Oh, no. It's the beginning. So Jacob had to turn around and work 7 more years. 7 more years for Rachel. All so that he could feel what he had done to Esau. After the 7 years were up, he came back to Laban. Laban gave to him not only Rachel, but gave Zilpah, a servant, to Leah, and Bilhah as a servant to Rachel. And now he had a family of 1 husband, 2 wives, and 2 maidservants. But here's where the problem really starts to hit. And it's this last disappointing verse in the life of Jacob. Then he proceeded to come also to Rachel. So he completed the marriage vow. He consummated the marriage with Rachel. Then he proceeded to love also Rachel from Leah. It means he loved Rachel more. Then he proceeded to serve Laban, that's the him, yet another 7 years. Boy, is God going to be using Laban to reform and transform Jacob. That next 7 years is something I would not envy and wish upon anyone. But this verse creates a problem, and it shows for us the difficulty of the situation. See, he had an extra wife, and as you guys, many of you already know the story, Leah is going to give to Jacob Zilpah, and Rachel is going to give to Jacob Bilhah, and he's going to have 2 wives and 2 concubines, 4 women, to produce the 12 tribes of Israel. Was that a good idea? Was it okay for Jacob to do that? And the answer is no, it's not. See, church, when God planned marriage and families from the very beginning, he made Adam and Eve. He did not make Adam and Eve and Lucy and Susan and Sharon and all of these other women to fulfill the desires of his heart. 1 man, 1 woman. That has always been the best solution for a family. Because, and as we found out this last week, if you guys were keeping up with the QT, we found out that the tendency was for families when they had more than 1 wife, a husband is going to love one more than the other. Think about what has already transpired. The damage that was already done because Isaac loved Esau more and Rebekah loved Jacob more. And now you're going to add into the mix 4 women? This is wrong. This is an astronomically poor choice. What would have been best for Jacob to do to save his life and to walk in the righteousness of God would be to just realize he was duped and to stay married and faithful to Leah. Notice, the Savior came from one of Leah's children, not from one of Rebekah's children. This decision sets up future conflict, but it does one thing above all. It takes the one problem that Isaac really had, and it exacerbates it so that Jacob has the favorite wife, and as a result of that, has the favorite children, which is going to wreck his family and going to hurt him beyond end. So what is God doing and by allowing the deception of Laban to impact Jacob so? Well, we talked about it at length. God is keeping his promise by refining Jacob on the journey, using the pain, the suffering, the difficulty, the treachery of Laban to make Jacob into the man of God that God wants him to be. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what God is doing with us. What is God doing by allowing sometimes deception of others to so impact us, allowing the treachery of others to hurt us, allowing those awful things that other people do to so heavily impact us? How come God isn't protecting us from that? It's because he wants to use it to refine us, to transform us, and to make us more into the image of the Lord Jesus Christ. Pain is God's tool. So we shouldn't run from it, nor do we want to embrace it. Our goal should always be, in the moments of our pain, to cry out to the Lord, I need you. Every hour, I need you. Please, come to me. Use this to transform me and to change me so that I can become the type of man of God that you want me to be. And God then takes the pain and he works it all out for good. So, GCCI, I challenge you to pray. In whatever moment you're facing today, whatever hurt or pain that is causing you to maybe suffer throughout this pandemic, you might be saying to yourself, I lost my business. How can God possibly use this? You might be saying, I'm so afraid. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to die. I don't want any of my friends or family to die. How can God use this? You might be saying, being in this huddled environment, I hate my family life. It's ripping us apart. We're always together. We're fighting more. It's just making things worse. How can God use this? I invite you today, claim the promise of God that he will keep you in the way that you shall go. Claim the promise of God that he will never leave you nor forsake you. And offer whatever your circumstances are to God and say, please, Lord, make it work out for good. I give you this part of my life. It's yours.